Okay guys, this week we are just going to do a couple of kind of miscellaneous skills that we need to cover before the end of the year. The first one is simplifying radical expressions, okay? And basically that's a fancy way of saying a way to simplify an imperfect square root or non-perfect square root without ending up with a decimal, okay? You know that a perfect square numbers like 1, 4, 9, 16, 25, etc. Well, instead of taking the decimal root, we can write these in a way where it's without a decimal, okay? So basically what we do is we write the number as, we factor the number, okay? And what I want to do is I want to come up with two factors. The best thing is if one of them is already a perfect square and one's a non-perfect square, okay? For example, this one right here, it's 12. Well, I know that breaks down into 6 and 2 and 3 and 4. Well, 6 and 2 and 3 and 4. One of these has a perfect square. It's 3 and 4. Okay, so I'm going to choose that. So what this breaks down into is then the square root of 4 times the square root of 3, right? Because it's the square root of 12, so it's going to be 4 times 3, the square root of 4 times the square root of 3. Now what we do is we can actually take the square root of 4. The square root of 4 is 2, okay? And then times the square root of 3. And this is how we leave it. That's it, okay? Except when we know that instead of having to have this dot here, if we just put those two things right beside each other, that also means multiply. So the complete answer is 2 the square root of 3, or 2 times, if it's standing side by side, it means being multiplied. So 2 the square root of 3. So this is a simplified way of writing an imperfect square root, or simplifying a square root that's not a perfect square. Okay? So let's move on to 90. Well, there are a few different factors. We could do 9 and 10, which that's the easiest and it serves our purpose because 9 is a perfect square. So this simplifies down to the square root of 9 times the square root of 10. Okay? The square root of 10 cannot be simplified down any further into two perfect squares. I can simplify it to 2 times 5, and that's it, basically. And neither one of those are perfect squares. But I can simplify the square root of 9. The square root of 9 is 3. And then I'm just going to bring this down times the square root of 10. Okay? And let me show what I mean. So if I were to break down the square root of 2 times the square root of 5, neither one of these are perfect squares. So I don't want to break it down further. I want to leave it as the square root of 10. Okay? I'll do another one. Say we had the square root of 18. Okay? Again, I have a couple of different factors I can choose from. I've got 3 and 6, and I've got 9 and 2. I want to choose 9 and 2 because 9 is a perfect square. So this will break down to the square root of 9 times the square root of 2. Okay? And then I actually take the square root of 9, which is 3, times the square root of 2. And that's the answer. Okay? A couple of other things you may have to do with this include multiplying square roots. Okay? So, let me show you how to do that. If I can find my eraser, that'd be cool. All right. Say I had the square root of 3 times the square root of 15. Okay? Well, right off the bat, I can't really do a whole lot with that. Okay? So let me actually write it out first. That would be cool. So number 4 is the square root of 3 times the square root of 15. Okay? And what I could do is I could just multiply 3 times 15 and I would end up with 45. And then see if I can simplify that. Okay, that's one way of doing it. Another way is going ahead and breaking down to 15 and then multiplying. My point is that there's multiple ways to do it. Okay, so I think the way I'm going to do it is I'm going to go ahead and multiply 3 times 15, and that equals 45. Okay, now I'm going to follow the steps that I did before, where I try to find a perfect square and I'm going to try to find two factors where one of them is a perfect square. And I think I found that. I've got 9 and 5 because 9 times 5 is 45. So what I end up with then is the square root of 9 times the square root of 5. Okay? And then that simplifies down to square root of 9 is 3 times the square root of 5. And that's it. Okay? Let me do another one. Let's see here. Okay, let's try the square root of 2 times the square root of 10. Okay? And again, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and multiply 2 times 10, which equals 20, right? So they'll end up with the square root of 20. Okay? Now I'm going to again simplify 20 into two factors where one of them is a perfect square. I list them out. I've got 2 and 10, I've got 4 and 5. 2 and 10 are not perfect squares. 4 is a perfect square, so I'm going to use that. So I've got then the square root of 4 times the square root of 5. Okay? And then I end up with the square root of 4 simplifies to 2. And then I drop down the square root of 5 because it's a prime number, and it's going to be 2 times the square root of 5. Okay? All right, that is it for today. And go ahead and write your notes down, and you can start your assignment.